Ben Thaler was the referee for this one. On the stats.
He was indeed.
Did you want to make more observation about that? Or his haircut?
Not really. Well, yeah, he looked like Ben Thaler, didn't he? He still looked like your Auntie Doris slightly. He's got that face, hasn't he? He doesn't quite look fully there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he has that certain 70s vibe.
Yeah, well, in the stats, over 500 more metres and almost 5% better team tackle success rate underpinned Saints' big win. They lost the error count 15-10, but had more breaks, more tackle busts, and a better average gain to more than make up for the errors. Individually, Tommy Makinson, 1 try, 5 tackle busts, 220 metres, 3 successful offloads. Mark Percival, 10 tackle busts, 182 metres, 3 successful offloads. Alex Walmsley, 1 try and 153 metres. Zeb Taylor, 1 try, 2 try assists, 144 metres, and 2 clean breaks. Imagine what his numbers would have been if he didn't go off for a head check as well.
Yeah.
For the losing Catalan side, Ben Garcia, 50 tackles. Joel Tompkins, 42 tackles, 10 of which were marker tackles. Sammy Stoney Lange, 121 metres, and his winger Fuad Yahar, 110 metres. Into the fan views. Do you want to start?
Yeah, Tom Andrews says, welcome back, Super League. Saints look great. Catalan back to being shit at the start and end of the season. Somehow we have both at once. Catalan big players just didn't stand up well, except for Lau, but that was before the match. Quite enjoyed Super League Gogglebox. Not sure what the Saints fans who didn't celebrate were watching.
Mm-hmm. Karsten said, Catalans, we're bend over and okay, forget the rest. It was fitting. Saints were really looking good. Saints looked really good and took all the advantages of the new rules gave them. A former Cowboy was outstanding too. Yeah, we'll get to Lachlan Coote, I think, when we start talking about the star players, but there's a couple of things to address there. Tim,
yeah.
First of all, the Super League Gogglebox, as Tom Andrews referred to it, which is, I think, a nice turn of phrase. Within the Saints fans not celebrating, or maybe celebrating, I assume some of them were maybe watching a feed that was on some sort of delay, and Sky didn't allow for that when they were recording them. But yeah, finally, we're into the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 7th season of the Super League pod, and I'm pretty sure David Pye's been along for the ride for most of those seasons, and every year in the predictions and in the voting for the awards, he puts that he's not a fan of any club. He's a fan of all the clubs. And every year I tell him, no, you're a St. Helens fan. Stop bullshitting us. And finally, I am justified in all these years of saying that about David, because there he was in his St. Helens top or jumper or whatever he was wearing in his garden, cheering them along on television.
It was a lovely looking garden, though. I did notice that. I thought, that looks...
Early stages of lockdown, they did some cracking work in their garden. They really did. They put a bit of a bar in. They set up some new planters and stuff. Oh, yeah. But all for the big reveal that Mark was right.
Should have had a banner behind him, shouldn't he? Just said hashtag Mark was right after all. Yeah. Maybe that's a challenge. If anyone else ends up, who's listening to the pod, ends up in future Rugby League Gogglebox, then your task is to sneak in some form of SLP related hashtag.
Yeah, definitely.
If you can.
Or apparel or anything. Yeah,
it's got to be subtle enough that you've got to notice it, but that's the challenge I'm laying down.
And you're not going to get pulled up on it by the Sky people.
Exactly. Yeah, it's got to be something you can sneak past.
Like, for example, Hull fans might want to think about painting something on a bedsheet.
Yeah, anything like that. Let's bring it on. That's the challenge from now on. I suppose the next thing to talk about is before we even started the match.
Yes.
And before we get to the next thing, Sky's film that they produced, similar to they did before the cricket came back, around the Black Lives Matter, and hearing from the Huddersfield players and their genuine experience of it. I found that really powerful, and the way they did that and the way they brought that story really to life and really illustrated the point of what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, it was moving and powerful, and like you say, it presses it home. It makes people like me and you who haven't had the same experiences as the guys that were talking on the video, more aware, I think, more aware of the impact of kind of innocent racism, like unintentional racism. They talked a bit about that, didn't they, in some of the stories they relayed, and it really does explain what people face for no real reason, what they shouldn't have to face.
And if we can do nothing else, we can listen and learn, exactly. And that's what we've got to do before we can do anything else. And I think that's entirely right. As for
before we move on to Flout, afterwards they had Martin Afai, didn't they, in the studio? Which
yes,
I think, before we went away for the break, they had a big in inverted commas name of sports broadcasting in Chris Kamara, didn't he? In
and former Brentford player of tiny shorts, yeah.
Yeah, and then when they come back, they bring in one of the biggest names, one of the most sort of celebrity versions of rugby league that we've got in Martin Afai, and it's 20 years since, or nearly 20 years since he last performed on the field, but he's still one of our biggest celebrities. So I think that is a good thing to do for the coverage, put a recognisable face there. But I don't always find what Martin Afai says and stuff that I don't know. There's sometimes I don't click with the guy necessarily, other than watching him run around people on the field all those years ago. But he did say something that he put across, I think, incredibly well, that I think maybe highlights some of the problem I have with why people get offended by Black Lives Matter. And his explanation was that, him and Brian Carney have gone and done charity events for Joining Jack. Just because they've done a charity event for muscular dystrophy, it doesn't mean that they, don't support charities that fight against cancer, don't support charities that fight against heart disease. It's not just because you support the Black Lives Matter campaign does not mean you're marginalising any other campaigns, is kind of the point he was making there. And I thought it was a really good analogy to make for people to maybe understand that by supporting one thing, you're not taking away from something else, and you shouldn't be treating people like they are.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, the whole response to it and the backlash that we've had, particularly in rugby league, has been very poor. I think the RFL saying they're going to do something and are going to launch in October is good news if they follow up on that, and if that is meaningful action, which it needs to be. I mean, it's a very charged environment at the moment on both sides, and I think you have to be mindful of that. But I think it's undeniable there are problems, and we need to do more, because rugby league can't afford to piss anyone off. We haven't got enough people playing, full stop. So anything we can do to keep as many people from whatever community involved in the game, we need to jump at it, because we should be out there, and we've got that proud history that we go on about. Having the first black captain, the first black coach in any sport. But history is only as good as if you keep it up. It's great in the past, but we need to be doing it now.
Yeah,
we need to be at the forefront now. We need to be innovating and making sure that we, if it means we have to introduce a Rooney Rule, for example, then let's be the first sport to properly do that. Let's do it.
Well, second sport to properly do it after the sport.
After, yeah, okay. In this country, I mean, in this country, the first sport to do that. Let's do that. Let's go. There's an opportunity for rugby league, because to go out and be the forefront of something and be ahead and be the best we can be, and let's do that. Yeah,
to underline all those sorts of things that we do herald as being great at. I mean, there was a good piece in the Yorkshire Post over the weekend about. It sort of focused on Hunslet and their kind of legacy of black players, and talked about they signed the black American sprinter back in 1912 or 13 or whatever it was. What's his name? Lucius Banks, is it? And And
I can't remember. Yeah,
they talked about how how even their papers kind of published things that were unacceptable, and Hunslet Club at the time challenged them on it and pointed it out and criticised them for it, and that's going over 100 years back. So we don't want to stop that kind of. I think we don't want to stop that approach to inclusivity, and long may it continue. The Folau conversation that we'll have now is a slightly different matter, I suppose, but obviously it's related to that same cause and conversation.
Yeah. So where do we start with this? So the fact of the matter is, he was the only player who chose not to take part in the taking it. It's a symbolic gesture, and we've seen it at many other sporting events thus far. Pretty much every football match I've watched in the last 2 months, they've done that as a gesture. I've not seen anyone not take part in football. In tennis, they've done it for the Back the Brits tournament. They did it there. There was somewhere else as well before I was coming up, but in Formula One, not everybody did it.
No, we've seen different approaches in Formula One. There's been some people.
Cricket was the one I was thinking of. Sorry, cricket. They did it. Formula One, it was discretionary as it is with anyone, and some people chose not to. Now, if you strongly believe it, that you don't think it's right to be part of it, then that's fine. I suppose what I would say is you need to explain your side of the story articulately and explain why you think your reasons for doing that. And ideally do it before the event so it doesn't take away from the rest of the thing. And now it's a narrative running through between that. You see that on Sunday, you see the Ed Barber stuff Thursday. It doesn't present rugby league very well as an inclusive sport for everybody if those two things are happening in the same week.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge shock, is it, that no. When it comes to Folau and something about sort of discrimination, fighting back against discrimination and those sorts of things. He's
almost because he discriminates against everybody who's discriminated against. He kind of sort of squares the circle in some respect.
Yeah. Now, I won't be getting on him for like his personal choice, because lots of people have put out their explanations and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of not a great look. Also, with the play that it is.
Because what I found really powerful about it, because I didn't notice it at the time.
No. And
what I found really powerful was seeing Robert Elston join in. I found that quite a symbolic part of it, and that actually it was for everybody. It wasn't just for the players, even that everybody was behind it. And that actually, to me, if that had been the image, it would be a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
And in terms of where we are, what I really don't like is the Twitterati who jumped on Folau as some sort of hero. Yeah. Said, everybody else is a sheep, and I've got into it with a few people over the last 24 hours because it's just using him as a vehicle for their own racial prejudice. Nothing else. That is exactly what it is. I don't like those people associated with it, so I'm going to use him as my poster boy, and it's just the same as if it was Tommy Robinson. And don't try and hide it up in any bullshit. That's what it is. You're using that as a smokescreen to state your own racial prejudice.
I think
and
if you want
it's not
consistent on personal choice matters, then that's part of your identity, your sort of personal belief structure, or whatever it may be, which is one thing. But using someone to back up and entrench prejudice that this person may or may not carry themselves, and probably doesn't.
And there's an argument from a Christian point of view.
Exactly, this is what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that the gesture of kneeling should only be for praying. Now, that, however...
I mean, but Folau has used his religion...
Smokescreen, yeah.
His religion as a reason for lots of things that he's done. Things that he's done that I feel are much worse than this
Yes.
thing. But it doesn't surprise